My name is Beck Biesecker. I'm the CEO and co-founder of 3D Cloud.
My name is Ryan Wood. I'm a data scientist at 3D Cloud. My background is in statistics and data analysis, data modeling, predictive modeling, all that good stuff.
Brian Wilson. I am the executive director of the home and office vertical here at 3D Cloud. So I run all delivery operations for all of our home and office customers.
I'm Amanda Blaker, and I'm the lead of the office pipeline. So we do the content that goes in all the apps.
When you think about calculating an ROI, there's a few things that go into it. One is you want to establish a baseline of how much, the volume of sales that a client would get without a 3D tool or some other thing that you're trying to measure the ROI of. And once you have that baseline, you want to measure the level of sales that you see ideally in market and real live testing among consumers that are exposed to that 3D tool or whatever it is that you're measuring the ROI of. And then you normalize the data between those two groups and calculate a percentage increase between them. And that's essentially your ROI. The raw percentage lift in sales volume between groups of consumers who are exposed versus not exposed to the 3D tools is the first element. That's the first thing you want to look at. After that, you probably also would be interested in translating that dollar amount to an actual profit value. And that profit value can then be compared to the cost of implementing the 3D tool, any other kind of cost that you have for implementation on the website, and really comparing that number after all the costs gives you the most representative measure of the value of the 3D tool itself.
We think about product configurators or modular configurators, which are kind of in the same family. Think of a product configurator as a monolithic object like an office chair, where you're changing components like the wheels or the fabrics or the back or the arms. And then you have modular configurators. Think about that as like Legos, where you have a sectional sofa where you're actually configuring the individual pieces, but also linking your the components of the project, sort of horizontally or vertically. You could also do this with things like kitchen cabinets and so forth. So we actually see average, add to cart rates for modular configurators as high as like 35%, and with like a 3% purchase rate, which is incredible because an average, transaction rate on a product that's added to cart is like 0.5%, right? So, it's 6 times.
There's a lot of things that go into the complexity of a configurator. The main thing that we look at that I've kind of like boiled it down to is the number of options that the configurator has. So in terms of mesh count or geo count, the cost comes from like the number of geo that you have. And that is dependent on the number of actual shape swaps that happen, right? So a chair going from having no arms to having arms is going to add another layer of complexity. You can take like a sectional family, for instance, right? And say like, oh, there's a ton of options because there's 5,000 fabrics that can be swapped on this thing. But that doesn't really add complexity. But if you have 500 arm options, that changes things because we have to swap the geo every single time you change the arm.
Generally, it's not immediate, especially when you want to have good measurement of the effects. It's going to take a little bit of time to build up a data set and watch it. In the first year, especially in the first, call it like 3-4 months, you're doing a lot of iteration and optimization of the discoverability of the tool and usability of the tool. But then in the second and third year, generally is when we see really healthy ROIs being achieved for the client. So in that 2 to 3 year range is a typical really safe area to start seeing not only a full payback, but also positive ROI on top of the cost of implementation. The biggest thing that the 3D Commerce Index in the last couple of quarters has shown is that usage of 3D tools and the availability of 3D tools is becoming more and more table stakes to consumers.
If you have a modular configurator, the interactive rate from a customer is nearly 90%. In other words, they're now expecting to go onto a furniture retailer's website and not just look at a preset, here's a 3-piece, a 5-piece, a 7-piece. They want to make their own 8-piece or their own 11-piece.
People come to e-commerce websites that have 3D tools enabled, and it takes them less time to start interacting with the 3D tools. and they interact with 3D tools a second or third time in a second or third session at a higher rate than they did before. We're starting to see this dynamic of if you don't have 3D tools, users are generally less engaged and less likely to add to cart.
We're always helping our clients understand like where they fit. Are they at, above, below, or are they a best-in-class performer? So for instance, for a product configurator, a typical interaction rate is something like 13%, but a best-in-class interaction rate is like 50%, right? It's almost 4 times improvement. A typical session duration for all product configurators is somewhere between 1:45 to 2 minutes, and the average order values maybe, 1,500, call it. But a best performer in product configurators can be a 50% interaction rate and an average order value of approaching $10,000.
One of the best things that I've seen is kind of a creative approach to using a 3D product configurator to generate a custom order package, essentially, where the 3D product configurator from 3D Cloud outputs the full copy and pastable into the system custom order ticket. So your frame, all your covers, leg finish, et cetera, all the way top to bottom in the exact format that one of your in-store associates would enter into your special order program buying tool. And when they did this, I mean, sales for that program, having a tool like this, went up over 90%.
The ones that do it well, it's all about visibility. One, like on your website, it's about getting it in, 3D tools in the header, making sure it shows up on the product page. Rainmore Flanigan is like a great example I always point to. They've got an incredible product page where they have every sort of way you can see the product available. And then they've also gotten the footer, and then they also make sure that any of these tools are searchable. So people go on to a retailer website and say 3D sectional configurator, like they're looking for it. So it's visibility.
An asset doesn't have to just be a 3D asset. It could be a photography asset where normally you'd set up a shoot and you have to shoot it. And I'm going to use 700 covers. You got to go through and shoot all of those. Well, if you have a 3D product configurator with the ability to produce renders or images of those products, you don't have to do that anymore. And so a lot of retailers are now moving in the direction of using it to replace a lot of photography. Not completely, right? There's always going to be a desire for that, but filling out your photography catalog of products and various covers is becoming increasingly more important. So you can spend pennies to generate these renders and these photographs instead of massive amounts of dollars to set up shoots and hire people and photography and all that stuff. One of the biggest pitfalls amongst companies that are getting into the 3D space is you really have to establish within your organization what I often reference as an emotional leader. When you have people overseeing it, you can build an actual plan to get things created and reviewed and everything. And I think what catches a lot of people by surprise is just like any other large scale digital transformation you're going to do within your organization, you really have to have the team there to support it. The best 3D programs that we've seen scaled here, often there's a person at the helm running the ship that bridges all of those gaps really well.
It's a long-term investment. So just like when one of their customers buys one of their products, they consider it like a quality product that's going to last a long time, right? And so our configurators are the same way. If we build them right and we build them accurately and we integrate your pricing and availability like at the beginning, then you're going to have this quality long-term product that's going to last the life of your product line.
The fact that you can interact with the product, make it your own, customize it all online without actually having to interact with a sales professional or do a special order, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. That's what we all expect to be able to book our own airline, ticket online. And that's exactly what these tools do. They give homeowners and the ability to, create whatever they want and follow through with the transaction, even if it's a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 purchase.